Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to our Wednesday evening discussion. And I hope that you enjoyed my new countdown. And I thought it was kind of, it was fun. I spent, a good little bit of time on it, and I hope that you enjoyed it. My name is Eric Stevens. I'm the founder of #HireHigherEd and #ChangeHigherEd. We're hosting a series of discussions that are all about helping people recognize when it's time to leave academia, what they should do during that transition, and all that kind of stuff. And it's been a lot of fun. This is our third week doing these discussions, and I've had just a lot of just really positive feedback from people, and I'm really grateful for that positive feedback that people have given. Because I don't know, I mean, for those of you who are unemployed or who are facing that right now, it is hard. It's so hard, and it's okay that it's hard. Just as long as you just make an active effort to find people. And this is kind of like the thing that I've been talking about to others, is just make sure that you connect with folk. And that's what I'm hoping to do with discussions like these each week. And so I'm really excited. This week we have Jennifer Beech, Samantha Klein, and Vicky Sherwood who are joining us. We're going to be talking specifically about not what to do when you want to leave academia, but it's kind of goes a little bit deeper than that. I think this is going to be a fun conversation, the way that it's recognizing that it is time, like that aha moment. When you realize that this is no longer for me. That can be a really scary thing to admit, especially when you've invested so much of your life into this thing. And so I'm hoping that these conversations just kind of help us breathe a little bit and find some moments of solidarity. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce our panelists for this evening. Before I do, just as a reminder, next week we have another panel coming up. It's called "Hi, I Am a Consultant: Turning Your Subject Matter Expertise into Cash Money," with let me see my list of panelists because I'm horrible at remembering names and pronunciations. Renu Zundrawad, Emily Crookston, Renee Minar, and Christina Powers, who will all be joining us next week. And there's some pretty cool experience from all over the place. So let's get into our discussion for this evening. I'm going to bring everybody up on the screen, and we'll just kind of do follow that same format that we have been. They'll take a moment to introduce themselves, share their who they are and what they do, and then we'll have a fun conversation, I hope. So here, let me introduce you to, this is Jennifer Beech, Samantha Klein, and Vicky Sherwood. Thank you so much for joining me and us. Thank you. Jennifer, could you start us off?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting this session, and everyone for coming. I mean, I think this will be a really great discussion. I am Jennifer Beech, currently in Memphis, Tennessee, where it has been raining for the past, I know, all of today and yesterday. I currently work at the University of Memphis. I am a graduation analyst, so I'm the person who certifies all of the graduate degrees and also does thesis and dissertation editing, and trying to transition into instructional design.
Excellent. Samantha.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Samantha. I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and we are finally getting some cool, beautiful fall weather. So sorry that you're stuck in the rain, Jennifer. The nice thing about doing this virtually is I get to enjoy the sun coming in my window while I'm doing this. I work as a proposal writer for a medical software company. And before that, my academic background was in English language and literature.
And Vicky.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Eric, for inviting me. This is fantastic to talk about this topic. I'm a medical writer now. I work in the pharmaceutical industry, writing various bits and pieces for new products that they're bringing out. But I was a former academic and PI in the UK, in Europe, so it's very late here my time. There's certainly no sunshine coming in, it's pitch black. Yeah, I made that transition about 4.5 years ago now. Doesn't seem that long ago. So you know, I'm quite interested in discussing this topic because it took me a long time to be able to come to the conclusion that I was ready to leave. So you know, I've got lots and lots of insight into this, and I'm happy to share it. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, and again, thank you. Thank all of you for coming and for being willing to share your stories. I've known Samantha for several years now. We went to graduate school together, but I've just met Jennifer and Vicky over these past few months, and it's really fun to see how connected that we can get when we take a moment to realize that, I don't know, that our networks are made up of people, and people like to discuss things and talk about things. And so here we'll just kind of start. Here's just me just reminding everybody to, you know, don't forget to submit your questions. You get a chance to win a coaching session with one of our panelists. And hello to Beth Jane as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're just gonna start with Jennifer and kind of go along that same order for Jennifer, Samantha, and then Vicky. And then I'll kind of share my story as well if it fits. But just let's just kind of take a moment for you to hear your story, and like when was it that you decided to leave academia, and what does it mean for you? Because it might mean something different for somebody else. Please, Jennifer.
Sorry, I was muted, you know. I would say for me, it was towards the end of my doctoral program. So like Samantha, I was in English and was specifically African-American literature. And, you know, towards the end, when you're doing the job market thing and getting your CV and your cover letter and your research statement and your teaching statement and your diversity statement and all of your, you know, all the stuff that you have to put together. And my department wasn't as helpful with that. So I was really left to a lot of my own devices. And so, you know, of course, Google becomes your friend, your fellow classmates become your friend, and you're sort of trying to piece together all this information. And towards the end of my program, I was teaching, I was an adjunct, and I was also dating my now husband at the time. And so you just start kind of thinking about, you know, what jobs you want, where you want to live, because, you know, academia is kind of somewhat, I guess, about the location, even though people will tell you don't think about it. And just kind of what sort of life you want, and kind of what kind of institution do you want to be in, and all of those kinds of things. And I would say I just really started thinking through, you know, those questions, those values, what you want to do, what you want your life to look like. My advisor was going through medical treatments at the time, so she wasn't as available to me. And so I think gradually I just sort of kind of drifted away, I guess, from that lifestyle. And I guess, like Vicky was mentioning, it does kind of take a while for you to really actually leave, I guess, kind of in your mind. Because I was thinking, well, maybe I just won't do tenure track. Maybe I'll just do, you know, an instructorship or just a full-time teaching position. And so I did pursue that for a while. And then, you know, those options are so limited, I guess, and in my area as well. Even though I do live in an area where there are a lot of schools and colleges and universities, it's just thinking about commutes and all of this sort of life things that it was kind of a saturated market where I was. So I started seeing all these job ads for this thing called instructional design, and just wanted to figure out what that was. and started doing more research into that and networking and asking people, and thought, oh, well, this is something I kind of already do that I think I can do as a career. And so that's been about maybe 2 years ago, and I've been on that track ever since. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's something that I would like to kind of like talk about. What you said there for a moment is just kind of like some of these unexpected burdens that we are expected to take on. Like, like if you have to commute for an hour to teach, well, that's, good for you. Like, that's what you should be doing. Or like you have to like take all these sacrifices that we shouldn't really have to take. And so hopefully we can kind of touch on that a little bit later too. All right. Yeah. Samantha, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. So I got out of academia even a little bit earlier. I got out of academia at the end of my master's program. So during my master's program, in addition to working on my master's, I was teaching an extra class on top of the teaching load that they gave. So in addition to my freshman and sophomore composition classes, I also taught university connections for incoming students. And I tutored in our writing center. And I founded a science writing center and got that off the ground. While I was doing all that, I was also working 30 to 40 hours a week as a support staff for individuals with disabilities. And I was doing that to pay my bills. So towards the end of my master's degree, I was feeling really burnt out. And the path that I was looking towards in academia was a lot more burnout before I got to the reward that I was looking forward to. And I loved teaching. I absolutely loved all of the classes I was teaching, and I was excited at the prospect of being able to teach literature courses. I loved the research I was doing, and I felt like it was really meaningful and valuable work. But at the end of the day, I was looking at a situation where I felt like the path that I was on was going to be unsustainable for me to continue on it. And then while I was planning on putting together PhD applications and figuring out what to do, because at this point, like others have said, it didn't sink in my head that I was going to make that decision. I was feeling burnt out, but I hadn't yet realized like that means I need to make a change. I received an email from a recruiter for a software company that I had applied to before I had been able to find a graduate program that was a good fit where the funding worked out and all of that. And I had rescinded my application when I got accepted to graduate school. They had held on to it and contacted me 2 years later and said, hey, is your master's done yet? And if so, would you like to interview? I interviewed, and I felt like this is a company that I actually could see myself working for. They have a mission that's very oriented on doing good and making a positive change in the world. And even though I'm going to be entering the corporate world, I don't feel like I'm selling my soul to do it. And they offered me a starting salary that was significantly more than what I would be looking at making for many more years had I stayed on the academic track. And I would be able to work one job and not 4 jobs. And so that was the big motivating factor for me, was being able to have some of that work-life balance that people aim for. So for me, it was, can you do what you love and also do other things? Like, instead of taking the work-life balance to be, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, recognizing that even when you love your work, it's still work, and there's still family commitments and, hobbies and things that I wanted to explore in the world that I hadn't had a chance to touch on in 2 years that I really wanted to make time for.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. And again, I hope we can come back to this, like, this idea of, like, talk about those burdens that we take on and how it can contribute to that burnout that you were talking about. And then kind of like looking forward to, like, oh, there's more burnout to come. Like, how exciting. Okay. Vicky, could you,
Sure, yeah. So, okay, my story is different. I love this panel because everybody was at different stages. I was much further along in the academic path. As I mentioned, I was already principal investigator, had a research group of my own. And in the last position I was in before I left, it was a pretty much exclusive research position. I was doing a little bit of teaching, but very little. So I kind of, from the offset, from other people's perspectives, kind of had it made. You know, I had this job, and I was running a lab, and we were doing quite well, and the research was growing. But I think I was just down a path of, I guess, burnout, as the other panelists have mentioned. I was working all hours trying to keep everything going. I found being a new faculty member a bit of a hustle. You know, I was having to learn how to teach and teach well, and writing my teaching programs. I was having to fund the lab. I was having to learn how to manage a group. And I was kind of juggling all of these things, and, you know, developing an international profile as well, as much as you can, and trying to get ahead of the game all the time. And I always felt I was like 50 steps behind. And I got to a stage where I was pretty much writing grants all the time and not doing very much research. I'm a scientist, so I wasn't in the lab. It was the group who were in the lab. And so I felt as if I was getting to the point where I was thinking, is this going to be it? Is this going to be it for another 30 years? Am I going to be writing, you know, grants all the time and only getting 10% success rate? You know, it was draining. And I started just to think, was there potentially something out there? And this thing in the back of my head just wouldn't go away. And to begin with, I was like, this is ridiculous, and trying to push it away and not think about it, and just think it was a phase, and I would move on and get on with the job and get to where I needed to. But it just didn't go away. And I was in this position, it must have been for about anywhere from 12 to 14 months of, should I stay? Should I go? Am I gonna want to be doing this, you know, when I'm 60, 65, you know? And it just, in the end, I just decided to bite the bullet. I think you mentioned earlier, Eric, about aha moments. I don't think there was one for me. It was just this continual drip of me thinking about whether or not I should stay or go. And this continual draining feeling of being tired and exhausted and always behind. And I just thought there must be something else out there. And that's when I started to do some serious research into what else there was. And that led me to the path of leaving eventually. So yeah, my story was a little bit more, I guess I had the luxury of time to procrastinate, and that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And it took me ages. And I would say, actually, for anybody who's desperate to leave academia, although that might seem like a bit of a nightmare place to be, in fact, I think it's quite a good place to be, in as much as at least you know you want to go. Whereas I was in this kind of limbo for such a long time, and I essentially ended up wasting a lot of time. And you know, when I could have been a little bit more proactive about what I wanted. But it took time. It took time for me to get my head around it, for various reasons, which we might come on to in the discussion.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing your stories. And kind of like Vicky said, I'm really excited about the breadth of this panel, and at the different stages and across the different disciplines as well. Because I mean, Vicky, you do medical research and STEM, like lab work and stuff. I think that my story is kind of like this, like a weird combination and differentness about leaving academia. That it was kind of like like Vicky said, like this trickling feeling, like this kind of like dripping feeling. I was like, wow, like this happened in my master's program. I don't understand why that happened, but I guess that's just okay. I guess that happened. And then my PhD program, like, other things happen. I was like, oh, like, wow. I didn't realize that at this level, people acted like this, or other things. And then I got a job as a faculty member, and I had the same experience. Wow, I can't, like, this is hard. And then my last year at the university where I got into student affairs side of things, and again thought, wow, this is not what I expected. And then all of a sudden I find myself compelled to leave academia through a layoff. And just really like before I started all of this, it was really, I wanted to go back. I mean, I love education. I mean, I'm a teacher. I think I'm good at it, and I love that environment. But then after, like in the process of building this out and just kind of facing that, for lack of a better word, toxicity, as being outside of that group now, as being an outsider and looking in, I just thought, it's like, I can't do it anymore. And you mentioned like we want to talk about like that aha moment. Like, was there like one particular thing that happened? And some of us like might have it, some might not. For me, I'll kind of kick us off with the aha moment. I mean, I made an offer on Twitter to help people finish their dissertations and write a thesis. And I did it in a way that maybe it could have been, and it was perceived as abrasive, by me sharing that I had accomplished the things I had accomplished in a certain amount of time, and that I had won awards and things like that. And just the amount of negativity that I received from that. I had a friend text me and he said, every time that you respond to one of these people, to these academic trolls who have tenure, you just go in it like it's like a hydra. You cut off a head and then another one pops up, or two more pop up. And I respond to him. I was like, if it is my intention to be helpful, and like to maintain my integrity, is like, I want to help people. If I stick to that, then all I'm doing is exposing academia for what it is, just this really ugly monster. And I think that academics like to critique things, but I don't think that they apply that critique to themselves very often. And it can be really, really frustrating, as one who's experienced for me. So as we kind of talk about this, and maybe like if you don't have your own aha moment, or if it's not that quite poignant or whatnot, actually we'll start with that. Like, let's go with our aha moment, and then there's a question from our audience that I'd like to ask as well. So let's go ahead and start with that. Like, for those that there is that aha moment, what was that for you? Samantha, was there an aha moment for you?
Not for me. I think because I received a job, so like a recruiting email before I had really realized that I needed to leave, that moment was the aha, but it was more of this is an opportunity that I can't pass up. I would be foolish to continue on the path I was down and give up this opportunity.
Jennifer, how about yourself?
Yeah, I did have a specific moment. I think for me, it was just kind of like Vicky said, that kind of slow drip of maybe this isn't really what I want to do, or maybe there's something else out there. And I guess because I was working in higher education while I was getting my degree so that they would pay for it. So I was working full time at the university while I was, studying. So, it was just kind of this sort of thinking, is this what it is? And I don't know if anyone's done that exercise where professors, I guess, would generally say, well, close your eyes, and if you can think of anything else you should be doing, you should go do that. And I thought, well, that's just kind of useless, because I could imagine myself doing a lot of stuff. Like, and I guess the thinking is like, oh, well, maybe you only imagine yourself as an academic, and that means you're on the right track or something. But yeah, I always kind of thought about it, but I guess, it does take a while for you to kind of get serious about it. And then really go, oh, this is actually a real thing. And then I think for me, what I had observed from the people who graduated before me in my program was they either started on the tenure track or they just never got there. I have friends now that are 5 or 6, 7 years out, and they're still not tenure track. And so I thought, okay, well, if I leave, that means that there's no going back. So you're not going to be able to circle back around. Like, that's going to be it. And are you going to be okay with that? Because I think you kind of hinted at before, Eric, with that sort of finality, with that sort of the door shuts and you're just out, and I was like, well, it's one thing to be forced out, but if you choose to leave, are you going to be okay with the door just being shut? And that kind of took me a while to really think about, because I was like, so you're really going to give up this life? Really? It took me a while to kind of come around to, yeah, I think I'll be okay with that, so yeah, I would say it's a series of moments. The academic Kool-Aid is really strong, and I really feel the wanting to go back, and I really, and I feel the environment and liking, there's a reason why all of us we're in that area. We kind of have that personality that I think would draw us to academia. So yeah, I think that's just a normal part of the process, is that it takes a while to really separate yourself from it.
Yeah, thank you. And we also, like, from our audience too, Dr. Tim Sanguine said, for me, was receiving a STEMI that put me in the ICU. And I think that it's really important that we kind of acknowledge that some of the decisions that we, like, when we make these decisions, there are so many things that it's like, I'm not going to talk about that. Like, they're deeply personal things. And they're things that have happened to us, or like obligations that we have to our family. And so often those things, there's no room for that in academia. And it's hard that there's no room for that in academia. Vicky, before we move on, did you have anything to add as far as like any one of those particular drips that stood out to you more than others?
Right. Yeah. So I said I didn't have an actual aha moment as such. I'd always been under the premise that in academia, particularly as a research scientist, that you had the ultimate freedom to decide what you were going to do and what you were going to research. And that was always the rose-tinted glasses that I had on, at least as a PhD student, and even, early on in my postdoc career as well. However, what I came to discover as a PI is that, this academic freedom is there, in as much as you can ask as many questions as you want, but you do in fact have to have the funding to be able to provide the answers. So, this concept of freedom in your ability to do the research that you want it isn't true freedom. You have to be able to get the money in to be able to do that work. So there are limitations in what you can actually achieve. And I felt that the idea of staying in academia as a research scientist was to have this freedom to be able to explore different avenues and things that I wanted to do, when in reality, it wasn't that clear cut. You needed to be able to fund it. And I said before, I was having to do a lot of fundraising to keep the research going. So, all in all, it was a question of, do I keep this academic freedom, or this freedom of research alive at all costs, against anything else in my life, which I think, Jennifer mentioned, you have to, I think it was Samantha mentioned about hobbies and other things that you might want to do in life, just to have that academic freedom. And for me, that just wasn't panning out anymore. It wasn't balancing in my world. It wasn't enough, I should say. I didn't want to sacrifice everything else at all costs just to maintain that. And so I think that was the final thing that I'd weighed up in my head, that I was going to go and look elsewhere, because it just wasn't panning out to be the dream that I'd once thought it was.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that I can relate to that as well. That I was kind of sold this ideal and this dream, and some of it was, like impact. I guess I did it to myself or whatever that word is. But it's also the people that are around us and like the folklore, for lack of a better word, that we create around what academia is. So this is a question that we have from our audience. We were going to talk about this a little bit later, but this is a poignant question. So Courtney, she asks, how do you manage the sinking feeling associated with feeling ready to leave student affairs, particularly when almost done with the PhD program? Is there ever a time you would recommend just finishing it out? And so I think this is an important question for, especially I think for Jennifer and Samantha. Like if you kind of had that moment in the program, why did you decide to stick it out? And could you think of a scenario where you would recommend to say, you know what, but it's time to cut loose?
It's a really good question. I would say for me, I think I chose to go ahead and finish my degree because I think I knew about a year or two before I finished that I probably wouldn't, stay in academia. But I think I chose to go ahead and finish the degree. I guess it was my dissertation and the research I was doing that I really enjoyed and kind of wanted to finish out and see through. But I really can't think of a scenario where I would just say, oh, just totally leave. I would say maybe if your funding was running out or something, I could see. Yeah, I don't know if I really answered that question very well, but I did. But I did just sort of finish it out. Sometimes I wonder if I should have, because I was really kind of done. I was just like, I don't care. I'm just kind of done. Let's just get done. And now I deal with PhD students who are trying to finish their dissertation, and I just think, wow, they're just really invested in this. I don't know if I was ever that invested in it, but yeah, I guess those are my kind of random thoughts.
Yeah, I finished my master's program and left before pursuing my PhD. But by the time I had received the job offer, I had already defended and successfully defended my thesis. So I defended my thesis early to avoid paying additional thesis credits because finances were tight. And so I was saving money wherever I could. So for me, it did not make sense to cut out and leave early. So I received the job offer halfway, I believe, halfway through my last year, so right before the start of my last semester, and agreed on a start date after graduation. And there was flexibility in that, but I think even if they had offered me a start date before I graduated, I don't think I would have taken it in that case, because I was so close to the finish line at that point that I had already paid so much and had the funding figured out for the rest of the degree that I don't think I would have turned my back on that. But similar to Jennifer, I think for me, and this is some of my background showing that, for me, it was a financially motivated decision, and my decision to leave earlier would have also been financially motivated. It would have been, yeah, I really can't pay the bills. Even working all of these jobs, things are still falling through. That has to come first. I have to put food on the table. I have to pay for rent. I have to be able to take care of myself and my family. And those financial considerations were what drove me to leave and what would have made me pull the plug earlier.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. And before, because I want to get Vicky's perspective on this as someone who has been working with graduate students, like people like working with them before. And so yeah, like Vicky, could you speak to that? Like having like have you worked with students that were like, like, hey, and maybe advise them, like, is there a scenario where you would advise a student to, like, maybe this just isn't for you? What do you think?
Not directly in my own group. It never happened. Everybody wanted to continue and finish, which as a PI, that was great, because that's what PIs are there for, to try and encourage their students to complete their courses and support them in that. But I do know of people from other groups who subsequently decided to leave partway through their PhD programs. And I would say my experience of that is that 9 times out of 10, the academic community will try to gather round and keep that person going, try and encourage them to keep going and get to the end and finish for various reasons. But, I think not necessarily that in a bad way, but just to encourage people that, I've done it and you can do it too. And that's kind of the common thought and thread that exists in the community. And we all know that in a PhD particularly, there are times that are up and down, and sometimes you just feel like throwing it all in the air and running out. And sometimes it's going a bit better. So we know that sometimes it can just be cyclic or phases that you need to get through, and eventually you come out the other side. But I do think there are situations where, now coming out of academia and looking at it from a different perspective, there are situations where a PhD is just not right for somebody. It's not going to serve in their best interests. They maybe they were interested maybe as an undergraduate in their discipline that they were working on, and maybe they start and they get a year or two in and they realize this is just not for them, but they've been encouraged to keep going. And I think that's a huge time investment and financial investment for somebody to keep going at all costs. And so I think maybe then, retrospectively looking at it, there were certain individuals that the community gathered around and encouraged to keep going that maybe might have been better served actually taking a step out and trying something else. If it's not right for you, it's not right. And you don't know, like most jobs, you don't know until you're doing it, right? So I think most people in that situation, who find themselves in that situation, who want to leave, if they do reach out to their peers and their PIs and support group within academia, the group will try and keep them going. That's the majority of advice I think that's out there in the academic community.
Yeah, and I think that local support is really can kind of like sway things one way or the other. Let me see. And I think it was Andrea who asked the question, or no, it was Courtney who asked the question. You can also I have another panel that's that I'm organizing right now that we need to just set the date on. But it's a whole panel of people who left in the middle of graduate school. And so knowing that that it is possible, and the answer, I think, to is there ever a time that you'd recommend it? I think it's such a personal question, and you need to be able to find people who would give you answers in both directions. Saying hey, you should stay, or hey, maybe it is the time to go. And so this leads into a good question from Sammy. How might we be able to work with current faculty to encourage folk to set aside time in class or advising to talk about options beyond academia? And so, and I see Jennifer's it's like, I've got things. And so, so in those positions, what would you want to see happen? What kind of support do you think should be in graduate school for those alt-ac careers? This time, let's, if it's okay, let's start with Vicky and we'll go from there.
Oh, this is a great question, because I'm quite opinionated on this. Firstly, faculty, having been a faculty member myself, I don't think are necessarily the best people to offer career advice, certainly not on jobs outside of academia, because most of them have only ever worked in academia, and that's what they did. And so that's the advice they can give. That's how they can encourage people, because that's what they know. And I can say that explicitly, because when I was a PI, if anybody had come to me asking about possible job options outside of academia, I would send them to the Careers Advice Centre at the campus, because I just felt like I just literally couldn't offer any advice other than, if you don't want to do a postdoc, or you don't want to try for your own independent funding, or a faculty position, then I actually couldn't advise. I didn't feel like I had the right training to be able to do that. So, I think it's difficult for faculty members. Now, that said, I think, they could, if the university was invested to helping people and train them to be able to deal with these situations, because it is becoming more and more common that PhDs will take a step out and leave and start careers elsewhere. So, I do think their direct line managers, which is a supervisor or the principal investigator, should be equipped to be able to help them to some degree. So I think, I think that there's almost a pressure from the institution itself to be able to support their employees as well, their faculty members, to be able to best serve the people in their research group, and not just offering this one-sided view of what you can do with your research training. I think there's also questions around, certainly in the university I was, how good the careers advice was that I was provided with at the time when I decided to make the transition, given that I'd sent people down to this careers advice centre. When I actually experienced it myself, I realised it couldn't really offer me what I was looking for. So, bearing in mind I did leave a few years ago, and I think, maybe the situation's changing, and hopefully it is. I think there's more training that could be given to career advice centres and to faculty about, options of moving outside of academia. And, ultimately, a lot of these people, as I said, have never worked in industry, so it's very difficult for them to be able to offer that advice. And I think the use of external consultants who have worked in industry is something that should be more avidly encouraged within the academic community.
Jennifer and Samantha, what are your thoughts? Like, what support do you wish you had gotten while you were a graduate student?
So one of the things that this conversation is reminding me of is one of my very good undergraduate mentors and advisors when I was an undergraduate student told me, so she had gotten her degree from a very heavily research-focused, prestigious university when she got her PhD. And she chose to work at a teaching university that was not research-focused. And she told our class and told me in advising, the people who are advising you are going to give you advice based on their values and their goals. My advisors at this research-oriented institution gave me advice to help me get jobs at research-oriented institutions. And that wasn't the advice that I needed. And so I knew, because I had such transparent advisors who were wonderful mentors to me, that I was getting advice from people who were biased sources and who were giving me advice based on the things that they thought were going to be most important to me, which was staying in academia. And so like Vicky said, the advice I was getting was from people who had only ever worked in academia in most cases, who didn't know what the options were, who in some ways sort of subscribed to the idea of, what are you going to do with an English degree? Teach? Yeah, like that's what you do. You go into research and academia and you teach as a professor or in schools, and you do your research on the side like that. Or you go for a research-oriented university and you're doing your research and you're presenting at conferences and you're, doing all that, and you've got a teaching load. Like that's what you do. And so I think that really the advice that I needed was, what are the job options out there outside of academia? Just knowing there are opportunities would have given me a huge step up. And I think in my case, I had found some from before I had entered academia, but that gave me an advantage. Having done a job search before I got accepted to graduate school, let me know, here are the things that I could do with my undergraduate degree. Here are the things that I can do with a graduate degree that are not specifically in academia, that still apply the skills that I've learned and gained over the course of this program.
Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
Sitting here listening to the panelists. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say definitely someone that you can kind of talk through. I think kind of like Samantha was saying, sort of all of your options. I think a lot of times in academia, you're just going to hear job advice or career advice or, you know, that sort of side of your life. But as we've been talking about, you know, we're multifaceted individuals. There's so much more to you than just your job or your career. So I think I would have wanted someone to sit and kind of go through options with me, as far as just your life. There was, for example, there was a teaching position that I was considering, and it was going to be sort of an hour commute each way. And my husband at the time was working nights, and I was a newlywed. And I thought, wow, I'm going to see you for 10 minutes in the morning while you go to bed and I'm going to work. And then I'm going to see you for maybe 10 or 20 minutes in the evening while you're going to work and I'm going to bed, you know? And, and it's like, what kind of life is that, you know? But to be able to have someone who would remind me to consider all the rest of my life. I think academics are really bad about thinking through all of the different options. I had a classmate who graduated, and I think he's been doing some like 1 year, 3 year instructor appointments. And he was like, I wish I would have thought about how hard it is to get up and move every 1 to 3 years. And I'm like, yeah, you know, that's the thing that no one ever tells you to consider. It's like, yeah, do you know how hard it's going to be to find a new doctor and a new dentist and a new hairstylist? And, you know, no one thinks about those things. It's just like, oh, go for the job, you know? And so I think that's probably the best advice. And I had to go outside of academia to find that. And then trying to explain the academic life to people who aren't in academia is very complicated. I'm like, okay, so, you know, how much time do you have for me to explain, you know, why this is such a huge issue? So I think finding those people who understand, and I had some really sympathetic friends who are like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, even though I'm staying in academia, but I know what you're saying. And then sort of my friends and family outside of academia who were kind of like, why is that even an issue? And so trying to kind of balance that, I think. And that's why, you know, I kind of jumped on, you know, Eric's LinkedIn, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like no one was talking about these things except maybe on Facebook or something, but like no one in person, you know, was really talking about this.
Yeah. And I think that, that's, this is a question that just came in from Nicola, that I'll put up here, that is hard to tackle, because of what we're just talking about. It says, I have a good life in academia. I love teaching and research, work in a good place, except I can't get a contract to get paid versus badly. How do you motivate yourself to get out when you actually love it? And here's like what I can say. I don't know that as much as, and I've heard this before, as much as you love academia, it will not love you back. It will continue to make those demands. It will continue to just beat down. And so that question is, you know, like how do you motivate yourself to get out when you actually love it? I promise you, you're going to find something outside of academia that you love more, that will treat you that way. Yeah, Samantha.
I'll just jump in and say I loved teaching and I loved my research. I did not leave because I hated academia or I didn't like what I was doing or I wasn't happy. And I strongly believe that had I continued through my PhD and worked teaching jobs, even if I was working adjunct and non-tenure track and cobbling that together, I strongly believe I would have loved it because I was very happy. My dissatisfaction was I could not afford to support myself and my family the way that I needed to. And that eventually led to my burnout because I was having to work jobs on the side and because I knew, you know, looking at my friends who had finished their degree programs, looking at the people who I knew in academia, reading about what the job market was like, reading about what the, looking at, what the salary I could expect would be if I was lucky enough to get one of those highly coveted positions. Those were the factors that drove me to leave. And so I can really relate to that feeling of, I love this, so I don't want to leave. But at the end of the day, like Eric was saying, it is a job, and it's a job of passion. It's a job that you love, but that if you're not being fairly compensated for your work, that's a problem. And I think that that's a problem that a lot of people in academia experience. But it's a very real problem where I'm currently paid very fairly for what I do with very good benefits. And that frees me up to be able to do things in my free time, like read and continue to do research and, do the things that I love, that I'm passionate about, and continue to bring my passions to my work. There's ways to find things that you love and be fairly compensated for your work.
And I would add, I think that's a great answer. Kind of two things. I would say one, I think that's a good place to be, because it'll keep you from romanticizing the other side. Because sometimes people think, oh, well, I'll just go into industry and it'll be great. No, as we said, that's a job too. There are issues over there too. And so I think it'll help you to be pretty objective when you're looking at other options outside of academia, because you like academia, and so, I mean, you could probably see some of the problems with it, but you see a lot of the good of it too. And I think it'll allow you to look at other industries, and yeah, there's going to be some issues and gatekeeping or whatever, no matter where you go. But you'll be able to see kind of the good and bad of both. And I can't even remember what my second point was, but I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. But I don't think that's a bad place to be. And I think, my second point, that especially now with technology, there are so many ways to teach, that I think that was the way that kind of got me out, was that you could still do that work, but you could do it somewhere else, or you could do it for yourself, or so there's a lot of different options out there. So it's good. I mean, I'm glad that you've identified that, yes, I love this work. And maybe you like some of the values that academia has. And so you can kind of look at some other industries, and maybe you'll settle in and say, no, I kind of like it here. I think I'm going to stay. Or, if you decide to leave, at least you've really given it a really good sort of objective look, that good researcher, in you that, is really good at close readings and texts and things, I think will really serve you really well.
Can I just jump in and add something as well? Because, this topic, this idea of passion has come up a few times. And, as the other panelists have said, I think it's fantastic that you find yourself in this position. And it's really hard to say, right, I'm going to leave my passion, because that's what I had to do myself. And I'm going to go out there and be brave and try and find something else that I find equally as passionate about. But I can promise you, if you go out with an open mind and you find an area or topic that needs solving, and you can work on that, over time you can redevelop a passion for something. I didn't think that was going to be possible. I thought when I left my research, I was leaving my life's passion for good, and I would have to just deal with that. And that's the mindset I had when I left. But actually, since leaving, I have found other things that I'm equally as passionate about, in retrospect. Now I look back, and I never, ever expected that. So I can promise you, if you're brave, and it's not working out for you for the various reasons that we've discussed, you will find a passion elsewhere. It is possible.
Nobody could hear me. No. I believe that's a beautiful note to leave on. To kind of wrap this up, that if you are brave, you're gonna find your passion. You will. It's there, and it's just a matter of having an honest conversation with yourself. Find mentors that you respect. Find new mentors that you'll come to respect, like I have over the past few months, and really make an effort to be brave, and you can make money with your passion. Like it's a beautiful thing. You can do that. Thank you. We're gonna wrap up, and first, congratulations to our winners. This is my woo winners, to Courtney Green and Andrea McMohan. McMohan. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll connect you with the panelists, and we can arrange that. So far, there's been some pretty fun success in having those, and they're pretty fun to do. And so I would just, again, Vicky, Samantha, and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your stories. And we wish you the best of luck. For all of those who are watching or listening, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to them, and just to build that community. That's what you need, honestly, is community. And so make sure you have it there. So I'll let y'all wave and say thank you so much. And y'all are wonderful people. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Bye.
Okay.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
all.
getting so much better at ending these, I think. So I'm just gonna click these buttons. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. This Nicola says, thank you everyone. Very helpful, and happy to oblige. I know that it's a hard thing to talk about leaving academia. I think that the analogy that I've been kind of talking about with people and having these discussions, it's akin to leaving a church, to leaving that kind of community, for those of you who've experienced that. And I wish that I could just express how much you need a community, how devastating it was for me to turn to that community in the moment that I needed them, and then see them not know how to respond. And that was hard to do. But know that there are people like Vicky and Jennifer and Samantha that are willing to reach out and connect. Your connection, your network is bigger than you think it is. And there's some amazing people who can offer you some pretty good advice if you just take a moment to sit down and listen. Thank you so much again for tuning in, for those who are watching, those who are listening, and those who are listening in the future. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you join us next week. That one will be at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, because we have time zones with California, Chicago, North Carolina, and South Africa. So I hope that you can join us, and thank you again to Vicky, Jennifer, and Samantha. You'll have a wonderful, wonderful evening.